welcome to the Sex Within Marriage podcast. I'm JD, marriage educator, coach, writer, and podcaster. At uncoveringintimacy.com, we offer a wide range of resources to help couples strengthen intimacy in all areas of their marriage. We're catching up today on our anonymous questions with those submitted in September of this year, so just last month. As always, these questions come from our anonymous Have a Question page with no contact information and only the context provided in the question. From that, we kick it around in our supporters forum for anyone to weigh in on, and then I post my answers in the form of a podcast episode like this one, as well as a blog post. And last episode, I was just starting to catch something. This week, I've been fighting with it all week, and I'm hoping I'm at the tail end of it. So if my voice is a little odd, that's why. And if it sounds a little disjointed and jumpy, it's because I'm taking lots of opportunities to pause, cough, clear my throat, get a drink, and then start back up again. All right, with that out of the way, let's jump right into question number 1. This person writes, me and my partner would never swing as we believe it's immoral. With that said, we've had multiple conversations about wanting to be heard/seen, having sex, or even having sex while another couple is having sex nearby. We've never done it as we are already sexually satisfied, but given as it's come up repeatedly, I've begun wondering about the morality of it. What are your thoughts? So one of our supporters, I think rightfully, quoted Matthew 5. You have heard it said that you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you that anyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Now, whether you're on the side that wants to look or the side that wants to be looked at, I don't think it makes a difference. Either way, I would consider this a form of adultery. And I would consider entertaining this idea along those same lines. Some argue that you cannot sin in your heart or mind, but only by your actions, but I believe this is contrary to what the Bible says. And there's lots of verses about this. One of them is in Mark 7, where Jesus says, what comes out of a man, that defiles a man. For from within, out of the heart of man, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile a man. When you entertain these temptations, you're providing a breeding ground for sin, which already begins to infect your life even before you act on them. In short, I think you're playing with fire or worse. I don't think being tempted is a sin, but I think entertaining that temptation is. You are giving it a foothold in your mind. All right, next question is, I don't really know what to do. Haven't had any sex with my wife in 4 months. I've tried to be patient, but we go through these month-long stints without sex often. We're in our early 30s. We're on vacation right now. No kids with us. Should be a relatively relaxing and stress-free environment, right? I tried to initiate, and she says that she appreciates it, but would rather wait until we're home. I'm not really angry, just sad. It's so disheartening. Any advice would be appreciated. So my first question is, what made you think that she was going to have sex with you on vacation? My guess is that you aren't talking about it at all. You've gone 4 months without sex without raising an issue in a significant way, and now you spring it on her on vacation. Now, if you talked about it beforehand and decided together that this was going to be a vacation with the intent of getting away together, talking about what's going on and making a plan to get your sex life back on track, then that's one thing. But instead, it sounds like you just assumed sex would happen and then got annoyed when your unexpressed expectation didn't happen. And don't get me wrong, I think 4 months without sex is a big deal. I think that the fact that this happens often is probably a serious issue that needs to be addressed, but not like that. It needs straightforward and direct conversation. And I'll put some links to dealing with differing sex drives and gatekeeping sex in the marriage in the show notes. I encourage you to go check them out, read through them, and then start a conversation with your wife. Don't just assume that this is going to get better, it'll improve one day, or that, things will just magically fix themselves on vacation. All right, question 3 is, how much should I tell my fiancé about my previous struggles with porn and the kinks it created? A while ago, I gave her a pretty comprehensive breakdown of my long history. I started young with porn. But the one thing that I didn't tell her was what kind of porn I watched. Years in porn got me into some pretty weird kinks with stuff like golden showers, gender bending, etc. I have been clean for a couple years at this point, but I can't deny the fact that these kinks still turn me on, and if I think about them. I would never ask her to participate in these disordered kinks when we get married. I want to leave all that behind me forever. But should she know about them anyways? They're not fetish level, and I can get turned on just fine without them, so they won't have a direct impact on our sex life. But since they did unfortunately inform my sexuality to some extent, does she need to know, or is it okay for me just to leave that behind? Now, the consensus in our supporters forum was that we couldn't find a good reason to dig into the details. Now, if it's something that comes up in your marriage and it's appropriate to, then yes, you shouldn't hide it from her. But hiding isn't the same as not being explicit. If she knows that you're open to talking about it and will answer questions if she has them, then we couldn't find a reason why you'd increase her burden by sharing the details. This question actually came with a part 2, which was unrelated to part 1. He wrote, also part 2, not a question really directly for the podcast, but more of a suggestion/request. I think it would be really helpful if you created a new top-level start here or key resources type of page. Your website is great, but there's so much it's a little overwhelming. It's hard to find stuff sometimes or know where to go. Having a single page that collects and links to things like your best/favorite articles, your most popular stuff, and key articles that every couple, or all men, or all women, or all high or low libido people, etc., should read would be super helpful, I think. And I agree. After more than a decade of blog posts and podcast episodes, it's become a bit of a mess. It's hard to jump in and find what you're looking for. I honestly forget some of the stuff I've written. So I added to the homepage a quick list of the most common things that people search for. I hope to expand this in the future to be more helpful, but hopefully that'll provide some guidance for now for people who are new or who are looking for solutions to the most common problems. All right, question 4 is, hi, thank you for all that you do. Your work is wonderful. I don't know any other good Christian websites like this. Can you recommend some other websites that are theologically solid and also get deep into the practical weeds of sex and sexuality like you do? Thanks. So this is a tricky question to answer, and not for the reason you might think. Some may think that it's rude to ask about my quote-unquote competitors, but I don't care about that. I don't think of them as competitors. I want you to get the help that you need, and if that's not me, then I sincerely hope someone else can help you. I've even refunded money to coaching clients because it was clear that coaching wasn't what they needed, so I asked them to take it back and spend it on a therapist. And there were lots of websites I frequented over a decade ago when we were struggling with our marriage. They helped us set us on the path that we're on. The problem is that was over a decade ago. And since then, much has happened. Some have closed their doors, some have had spouses die and shifted their ministry, some have joined with others and changed their ministry, some have shifted so far that I actually consider them a hindrance to the ministry now rather than a help. In all of them, though, I found things that I disagreed with. That's why I started this ministry, because I thought that there was still a large gap that wasn't being met. A big part of that was that most preferred to talk vaguely and didn't want to dig deeper into something. I found that there were questions one still was not allowed to ask, even for those who said everything was on the table. Many got offended if you questioned their views rather than being willing to discuss them. So I started my own. I wanted to be a resource that I wish I had had. Now, along the way, I've met some kindred spirits. Marrieddance.com and romanticblessings.com both run awesome stores that carry my resources as well as get linked to for a lot of products that I recommend. Love, Hope, Adventure and I sort of grew up together in the blogging sphere. I've recommended many wives to hotholyandhumorous.com because she specializes in supporting wives who have a higher sex drives than their husband. When I have time, I try to read what Gary Thomas is putting out this week on his Substack because I like the depth that he goes to. And even when I don't agree with him, I find him thoughtful and thought-provoking. And he'll accept those provocations in return if you challenge him. He's also not afraid to put out things that he's struggling with himself. And I find that a rare treat these days. And I'm sure there are a great many more out there that I just don't know about yet because, to be honest, I sort of stopped listening to podcasts and reading blogs quite a few years ago. As such, I'm a bit out of the loop. One of my supporters said that I have to check one out, but I didn't get a chance to yet, so I won't list it as a recommendation until I do. However, unfortunately, when I do poke my head up to see what people are putting out, often I'm disappointed with the kind of new generation of Christians in the marriage sphere. I see a lot of quote-unquote Christian ministries that push non-Christian thoughts. I see lots who shift to politics more often than talk about marriages, especially during the U.S. election cycles. I see them spending more time pushing votes than intimacy. In short, I see little Christianity in the new Christian marriage resources. And maybe that's just me getting old and preferring things that I'm used to. As for the theology side, no. I'm not an evangelical Christian, nor am I a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints, which is where I find most of the marriage ministries seem to come out of. I disagree with large fundamental chunks of the theology of both, as well as most Protestant Christians and all Catholic Christians. I'm not aware of anyone doing marriage ministry whose theology I agree with, so I can't help you there. That said, I don't think you have to agree with somebody's complete theology in order for them to have some great ideas about marriage. I disagree with a lot of the doctrine of the LDS Church when it comes to marriage for eternity. However, I think that because they believe this, they spend more time on fixing marriages than many other churches do. And as such, sometimes they have some really good ideas. Some of my favorite marriage books are from LDS writers who don't push some of that extra theology that doesn't get applied to marriage here on earth. Anyways, there are a few that I listed. I'm afraid I don't have a big list of resources of other bloggers or podcasters. These days, I spend a lot more time learning by reading my Bible, talking with other Christians, and helping people in their marriages, and finding out practically what works and what doesn't, as well as using surveys, my own and others that are out there, to try to get even more knowledge. All right, question number 5 is, Hi Jay, I know you've discussed how solo masturbation isn't right and that sex of any kind should be kept between a husband and wife. I need some clarification in regards to when me and my wife are separated. We married 3 years ago, and so far our sex and romantic life have been doing great. But as a trucker, I'm often away from home for extended periods of time. Is it wrong for me or her to masturbate on our separate ends? More specifically, is it all right if we're both aware of what the other is doing at the exact moment? Like over text or call and we're both active, especially if we're encouraging each other as we do it. So I use the watching a movie together test. If you could swap sex with watching a movie, could you still say that you did it together? So being together physically, definitely. If you're watching a movie sitting on a couch together, that would be watching a movie together. If you're watching it at the same time while video calling each other, I would say so. You're still watching it together. You're just separated by distance, but it's a shared experience. Watching it at the same time while voice chatting with each other so you can hear each other's reactions and kind of discuss, still yes. Watching it at the same time and texting through the movie at each other, that's starting to stretch the idea. But maybe some might still consider that, some wouldn't. Now, watching it at separate times and then telling each other your favorite parts later, well, now no one would say that they watched it together. They would now just say that they saw the same movie and are talking about it after the fact. That's my test. That's the rules I go by. So phone sex, yes. Video call, yes. Sexting, maybe. Sending a sweaty picture afterwards with a caption of, I was thinking of you, no. But these are my opinions. You figure out your own and work within your own convictions. Hopefully that just gives you some ideas. And lastly, question number 6. She writes, I'm 25 and married. The sex that we have has been fine, but I never had an orgasm except by oral sex. My husband tried different ways, but it just never happened until he took me from behind, pulled my head back by my hair, and pinched my nipples and slapped my rear. When he did this, everything became so sensitive and erotic for me that I had a very intense orgasm. He has tried biting my shoulders and nipples with soft bites, and I end up with these intense moaning orgasms. Are there any other women out there that need this type of treatment to have orgasms? So, the answer is yes, many. It's quite common. Usually it comes with a lot of shame, embarrassment, internal conflicts, not wanting to admit it, and similar things. We actually have been talking about this in the BDSM section of our supporter forum. The long and short of it is that he made sex exciting again. Everything you have described hit some sort of erogenous zone, but the biggest one that he triggered was probably your mind. I have a long-standing belief, which our surveys have supported, that women, more than men, tend to need sex to be exciting. Men will continue having mediocre sex if there's nothing else available, but women won't. Many would rather have no sex than boring sex, even if they're the ones keeping it boring. Not all, but many. That excitement can come from surprise. He just did it in your case. From adding in some sort of discomfort, like spanking or pinching, from being controlled, like the hair pulling, from trying new things, like all the things that you said, or from some sort of transgressive action. So this is doing something taboo, which again, a lot of the things that you said hit the mark for you. So with all that, your dopamine probably spiked really high, which ends up getting you really aroused, which in turn makes it easier to orgasm. And yeah, now, do you need all of that? Probably not. But on the other hand, there's probably more he could do, which would get you turned on even more. When you start playing with these edgier things, the game tends to switch from can I get you to orgasm to can I stop you from orgasming until I want you to, which adds a whole new layer of excitement and arousal. I have a whole guide on edging. There's a link to it in the show notes. As a result, from my understanding, many women who try it consider it less of a need and more of a desire because they end up really enjoying it. Now, if you want to know more, I suggest checking out our BDSM survey results. You may find some interesting ideas in there, as well as some relief that you're not alone. And that's it for today. As always, if you have a question, you can ask it on the website. There are now buttons that say any other questions. And as always, thanks to our growing number of supporters who help keep this ministry going. Without them, I have no doubt we would have lasted over a decade with no end in sight. And we'll talk to you next time.